Hello everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and this time we are going down the rabbit hole of Nintendo Switch 2 game leaks. Recently, a few different things have happened that are adding a little bit more context to the overall situation, and I do think we're getting a little bit of a better understanding of the kind of games we could be seeing in the first year of Switch 2. Some of these games may end up coming out a little bit beyond the first year, but still I think we're getting a pretty good picture. And when you think about it all, and then just consider all the different factors, it's very interesting. So that's what we're diving into today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So to start things off, I'm going to be speaking on some tweets that recently came out from the Riddler. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Riddler is known as this Twitter user who provides Pokemon-related leaks. And for years, many have thought that they were quite credible. A lot of their riddles seem to line up with legitimate mainline Pokemon release announcements. However, this year, when we got the Pokemon Presents to start the year in February, there was a lot of speculation based off the riddles from the Riddler that we'd be seeing an announcement for a black and white remake, and that did not happen. And so many have decided to no longer put their faith in the Riddler. However, I will say that oftentimes, when it comes to leakers, the ones that actually have information to leak, not the fake ones, if you're talking about something before it's actually officially been announced, there's always the potentiality that plans can change. And so what I think you'll find is that there is essentially no leaker or insider ever that has a 100% track record. So I don't think one miss is enough to completely discredit someone. However, you should still take it with a grain of salt. But something else I'd like to mention, Pioro, who also once upon a time was thought to be the most credible Nintendo leaker, and then eventually they were wrong, for different reasons that we have discussed in the past, but they did make mention at one point that they had heard talk of a black and white remake. They didn't put a lot of credibility into it, but they mentioned that there was something that they had heard, and so it does line up with what the Riddler has suggested in the past. Why it hasn't been announced yet? That's up for speculation. Perhaps it was cancelled, perhaps it was delayed, perhaps they were just wrong. But just looking at what the Riddler has said recently, new project hint with a hands together praying emoji. Then he says, by the way, this one is not Ikaku, that's all we could spill now. Enjoy. So Ikaku is a reference to Pokemon Legends ZA. So he's not talking about Pokemon Legends ZA, he's talking about a new project. Okay. But continuing on here, check the replies, few people nailed it so quickly, lol, good job. And so here, Sunrise says, oh, this is different? Is it a post-game or an app game? And Ku says, big one after Ikaku. Okay, so sounds like they're talking about, the big Pokemon game after Legends ZA, which, I mean, it makes sense that they would be talking about Gen 10. That shouldn't really be too much of a surprise. But something else he said in follow-up to Big One After Ikaku, and the corresponding console. So it feels like he's hinting at Switch 2. Again, Generation 10 of Pokemon after Legends ZA, that's not really anything crazy. And the fact that it'll be coming to Switch 2, also not really anything crazy. It should come to Switch 2, and we assume Gen 10 at this point is not coming out until 2026 because Legends ZA is the 2025 game. So I don't really think this is too crazy, but perhaps the reason why the Riddler may think this is a good thing to put out is the hint of the emoji. Could the emoji be giving us some sort of information about the actual game? Because if the story here is just that, yeah, Gen 10's coming to Nintendo Switch 2 after Legends ZA, duh. That's nothing. That doesn't make any sense to really create an entire thread for, unless there's something else being said here. And I think what's being said here is this emoji, this praying emoji, somehow relates to the game. So what could this mean for Gen 10? I think there's a variety of possibilities, but perhaps it could be hinting at the culture surrounding Gen 10. So when it comes to the different generations of Pokemon, Game Freak always makes sure to visit a particular region of the world for research, and a lot of the culture from that part of the world would lead to the creation of a new region. Most recently with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, clearly the region was inspired from Spain. So there are a few different regions that come to mind that perhaps could be popular for their religion or something like that. I don't want to dive any deeper because I feel like that can get a little controversial, but maybe that's what they're hinting at here. But what's also interesting is this other tweet that the Riddler just put out, and that's where they said Ikaku soon with the whole fireworks celebration emoji, and then here they say pre-odd, I assume like pre-order. So perhaps we're going to get some significant news on Legends ZA soon. Now, what I'm wondering is if this is somehow tied to Switch 2, because many of us think that the Switch 2 reveal is going to happen before the end of the year, and October seems like the last month that would make sense to have this sort of reveal before we really get into the holidays. Could it be that Legends ZA will also be part of this reveal and they'll be showing off footage running on Switch 2? It's possible. Of course, it also is possible that maybe they're just going to have a separate announcement regarding Legends ZA, and it has nothing to do with Switch 2. But then I'll throw out a third possibility. Maybe Legends ZA will be a part of the Switch 2 reveal trailer, but also Pokemon Company will release some new information on Legends ZA, just in general, at the same time or close to it, because, well, they also need to talk about it for Switch as well. Many feel like we are due for a Nintendo Direct because we only got a partner showcase in August, and we did not get the typical Direct we've gone the last 8 years this September, so perhaps there will be some kind of Direct that will be giving us Pokemon information, be it about Switch 2 or not about Switch 2. But moving on from this, something else that we learned somewhat recently is that the code name for Echoes of Wisdom is indeed Edward. Now, we knew about this codename for a great while before the game was even announced, but now we have confirmation of it, right? It was rumored before, we believed it as a pretty good leak, but this here, as Oatmeal Dome is pointing out, since we actually have the game and can see everything, it is the codename. Now, for those that don't know, Link's Awakening had the codename of Richard, and there is a leaker by the name of Midori, who now has a different account in Ryan for the Bronx, which is a whole other conversation because we haven't 100% proven that's the same user, although most people believe it is. But anyways, before that happened, before the June Direct, there was a series of different codename leaks that Midori provided. And some of those codename leaks led us to believe that there would be a new Super Mario Party game announced in the June Nintendo Direct, and that there would be a new 2D Zelda game. And that part was spot on. We got Super Mario Party Jamboree and The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, a new 2D Zelda game that would be related to the prior Zelda game that was codenamed Richard, Link's Awakening. They're using the same art style, they're both made by Grezzo, makes sense. And for those that maybe don't understand the relation, Edward and Richard were royal brothers. But these are Switch 1 games. How does this relate to Switch 2? Well, what it does is it offers a bit more credence to the other prior codename leaks from the same person. So, Midori also talked about a project known as U-King-O. U-King-O, we believe to be the Switch 2 version of Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild had the codename of U-King, and typically, whenever there's an additional letter added to a codename after the original game came out, this is suggesting that there's a new version of that game. And this is interesting because last year, from the Gamescom leaks, we heard about a demonstration of Breath of the Wild running on hypothetical Switch 2 specs at 4K, 60 frames per second, with next to no load times. And personally, I don't love the idea of Nintendo releasing a remaster of Breath of the Wild early on for Switch 2. Mainly because I have Breath of the Wild now, and I continue to play Breath of the Wild. But just because I wouldn't be that interested in spending, say, $70 on a 4K version of Breath of the Wild, that doesn't mean Nintendo won't do it. And also, depending on how Nintendo brands it, it may not even be that big of a deal. Maybe they might even position it as a cheap upgrade for Switch 2 owners who had Breath of the Wild. If there's a way to prove that, then it would be fine. And so just thinking about this new version of Breath of the Wild, not only would this game be running at, I guess, 4K at 60 frames per second, which would be pretty cool, and next to no load times, like that would make fast travel and entering different areas a lot quicker, but perhaps they could be expanding on the game a little bit more. Like, say for example, when you enter the Divine Beasts, could they make it so they are not separate loading zones, where you could just jump out of the Divine Beast and just paraglide throughout the map of Hyrule? Because you could not do that in Breath of the Wild. You can in Tears of the Kingdom, but not in Breath of the Wild. So it might be neat to see them go back and make such a change. But something else when it comes to Switch 2, there has been speculation on some changes to the controller. Now, we don't know for sure what those changes might be, and maybe it's the case there won't really be any changes. Of course, what we have seen from the leaked prototype doesn't suggest that, but what we have heard is that it is just a prototype from October of 2023, and that there have been several iterations of it, so there could be some changes there that might have some new control options. And one option that has been discussed with a fair bit of frequency are the scroll wheel shoulder buttons. Now, this is a rumor, but a while back, there was a TSA agent who put out a post describing a Nintendo device that had shoulder buttons that could scroll. And they provided verification of their work. Now, this doesn't prove that the story is true, but it does offer some level of credence to the point where at least we know that a TSA agent was talking about this at one point. But what's also interesting about it is that Sakurai did put out a video a little while back where he talked about how he's told Nintendo that he wants them to put in a scroll wheel shoulder button into their console for years. And then of course there are the patents from Nintendo on scroll wheel shoulder buttons. So it isn't like a straight up complete impossibility. There is some reason to think it could happen. Of course it may not happen, but under the assumption it is happening, just looking at what that might mean for say like a Breath of the Wild remaster, it might be nice to use these scroll wheel shoulder buttons to speed up how we move throughout the UI. That can make it a more comfortable game to play. And recently I talked about the possibility of a Star Fox game on Switch 2, and how like the control sticks on the Switch 2 controller, perhaps those could have some form of resistance added, kind of similar to the PS5 controller and how the triggers offer resistance there, except if it's in the control stick, say you're moving say through like a swamp or through snow, you might feel some of that resistance, and that could be something they could add to Breath of the Wild. So if Breath of the Wild has some unique control changes on Switch 2, plus with the improved visuals and performance and load times, if there's just like a $10 upgrade option, if you're like an NSO member on Switch 2, then I could see myself going for something like that. Of course, we are speculating here, we do not know. Maybe this Codename project isn't even something that's going to come out. Maybe it's just referencing the demonstration that they had for Switch 2, and that's all it is. But there were other Codename leaks from Midori. There was SP Red, which we know is basically a reference to a new Mario game. But there was another by Silver Star. Now what's interesting about this is that Red Star was the codename for Super Mario Odyssey, so I speculated that Silver Star might have something to do with maybe Donkey Kong. But I think it also should be noted that when Midori talked about Silver Star, there was less certainty on what's going on with that particular project in comparison to these other codename leaks that they discussed, such as Project Legacy. Legacy is something that's supposedly being made by Monolith Soft, and if we look at what Ryan from the Bronx has suggested about Codename Legacy, it's still happening, it's still being made by Monolith Soft. Now again, we're not 100% certain that Ryan from the Bronx is Midori, but we think it's likely. And they did also mention the possibility of Xenoblade Chronicles X coming to not just Nintendo Switch 1, but there being a version for Switch 2 as well. So Monolith Soft might be cooking some really cool things here, not just a remaster of Xenoblade Chronicles X, but also that new IP we've been waiting so many years for. And then going beyond that, we've also heard about some sort of follow-up to Switch Sports. Switch Sports had the codename of Elsa, and there's this other codename of Anna. Anna and Elsa are those Disney princess sisters, so perhaps there's going to be some sort of similar game to Switch Sports. Maybe just straight up Switch Sports Resort or Switch Sports 2. It makes sense to have some kind of game like that in the first year of Switch 2, maybe even in that first month or two. And if that's the case, this feels like a game we'll likely see in the Switch 2 reveal, which means we might see it perhaps in the matter of just a few short weeks. And then there was also the codename of Spiral, which Midori suggested was for Splatoon. And what's interesting about this one we did just get the final Splatfest. And when we got the final Splatfest for Splatoon 1, a year later, we got Splatoon 2. So does that mean we could see Splatoon 4 as soon as this time next year? I think it's possible. I'm thinking we may have to wait just a little bit more, because also, we had to wait years after the final Splatfest for Splatoon 2 before we got Splatoon 3. So I wouldn't say just because we got the final Splatfest that means that the next Splatoon is right around the corner. Now we do know that the results of the final Splatfest do dictate where the story will go next. So I guess it's possible that perhaps they could have a pretty good working build of Splatoon 4, and at this point they're just sort of working on the story stuff for the campaign. It is basically what they did for Splatoon 1 moving on to Switch 2. But with that all said, I'm now done with this talk on the Codename Leaks. This next topic here, it's not even going to be a Nintendo published game, it's just something I'm very excited about that's very popular on Nintendo consoles, and that's Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter Wilds has recently gotten its release date for February 28th, and we still haven't seen an announcement for a Switch 2 version. Of course, Nintendo hasn't revealed the Switch 2 yet, so Capcom wouldn't even be allowed to reveal the Switch 2 version due to NDAs. But it has been widely speculated, given the popularity of Monster Hunter on Nintendo consoles, and what we've heard about Switch 2 being able to run a lot of third-party games, that this game would be coming. A while back, Necrofelipe from Universal Nintendo indicated that Monster Hunter, the next mainline Monster Hunter, will release on the next generation Switch 2. Yeah, great. But also, in this VGC interview with Capcom when they were playing Monster Hunter, just before we left, we asked about bringing the series back to Nintendo, perhaps on more advanced hardware. A hearty laugh filled the room. A question for another day, perhaps. Now, this is by no means confirmation of anything, but it isn't deconfirmation either. If they're under NDA, they cannot say what they are doing regarding Monster Hunter Wilds and Nintendo Switch 2. If they weren't under NDA, they could just say there's nothing currently in the works for that. But they didn't. So I am optimistically thinking that Monster Hunter Wilds is coming to Switch 2. Now, recently I did make mention that with Monster Hunter Wilds coming out February 28th, that maybe it could even be a launch title for Switch 2, which is me indicating this extremely small possibility of Switch 2 coming out at the end of February. I don't actually think this is happening, but I'm just mentioning it as a very small possibility, because if we were to get, say, a Switch 2 reveal, I don't know, next week, hypothetically speaking, right, then that would be earlier in the year of 2024 than when Switch 1 was announced back in 2016, because that happened on October 20th, by almost a week, a little bit more. So, if they are to have a very similar reveal trailer to release window, then that would actually position them for not the third day of March like with Switch 1, but for the end of February. Now, I think it's unlikely that they're going to have literally like the exact same reveal to release window in terms of time, give or take a couple days. I think it's probably going to be a little different. But I do think it does suggest the possibility, again assuming we get a reveal, say, next week, that it could happen. What I think makes more sense, though, is that we're going to get Monster Hunter Wilds for Switch 2. Yes, I think Switch 2 will be able to run it. I know some people think that it won't be able to happen because it hasn't been running well on some current-gen consoles. Personally, I just think that comes down to an optimization issue. We haven't even seen a final build of the game yet, by the way. Who knows, maybe they've been prioritizing the Switch 2 version because they've known that that would be the best-selling version. But regardless, I can see it coming out before on the other consoles, and then maybe a few weeks or a month or two later, it releases early on for Switch 2. So it's still there pretty early on. It gives the other versions some leg room to kind of do their own thing and have some success, but then the portable version of Monster Hunter Wilds, which I think will run relatively well, will come out for Switch 2 and likely become the best-selling version. At least better than the PlayStation and Xbox versions. And I've even thrown out this crazy theory. I know, it's a crazy fun theory, right? I don't believe this, but it would be a great way to get a lot of people excited that because it's a timed delay, right? Maybe they provide some exclusive content for the Switch 2 version, And that exclusive content is a unique monster event where you fight a unique monster only that can be found in the Switch 2 version, and this unique monster is essentially Ridley, which could be great cross-promotion for Metroid Prime 4 that is also likely coming out sometime around this period. We know it's coming out in 2025, so it would make sense to have some kind of cross-promotion there. And we have seen Capcom use Monster Hunter and have some Nintendo-related cross-promotion in the past. They've done that on 3DS, and we've also seen big AAA games that come out a little bit later have some Nintendo cross-promotion as well. Skyrim, okay, that's not a little bit later, it's a lot later, but it did come out for Switch, and they had the Breath of the Wild cross-promotional material in it. So I don't think it's entirely unprecedented, but of course, a unique monster like Ridley, well, that's just a whole other level. But if they did it, come on, I know I'm not the only one that would be extremely hyped for that. And that might even bring even more people into buying Monster Hunter Wilds on Switch 2, while also simultaneously hyping people up for Prime 4. And actually, you know what? There's one more thing I'll talk about. Metroid's making me think about this right now. It's a surprise thing that I wasn't planning on doing, but we did recently see that Sakurai said this on YouTube 8 hours ago from when I'm recording this. As mentioned previously, I'll be wrapping up production of new episodes for my YouTube channel soon. Right now, it's looking like the last scheduled episode will release on Tuesday, October 15th. However, I'm also working on a special final episode to come afterward, so please stay tuned for more details. So this in itself isn't really saying anything related to Switch 2 games, but I do think it sort of showcases that things are wrapping up with the Sakurai channel, as he said in the past, but we didn't know exactly when it would be wrapping up, and here we're getting a last episode on October 15th. There will be one finale episode coming out afterwards, and we don't know the exact timing of that, but what I find interesting about this is that it's happening in October, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the last month this year where we think they could reasonably reveal Switch 2 before the holidays, and if not, then we're waiting until next year. And so I will entertain the possibility. Could the creator of Smash Bros., Sakurai, be already working on the next Smash Bros.? I personally think it's very likely. And with the reveal about to happen, maybe they might even want to make mention that Smash Bros. Is in development. It's possible. But the reason Metroid reminded me of this is because when we go back to the beginning of the Switch era, I felt that there was actually some significant promotional plans for Metroid. At E3 2017, there were two Metroid games. There was Samus Returns to close out the 3DS, and the confirmation of Metroid Prime 4 for Switch. But then in 2018, at E3, just a year later, the big closing announcement was Ridley coming to Super Smash Bros. And they had this whole epic cutscene between Samus and Ridley. And we did see that they did use Smash to tease further future announcements for big games, like in the case of Luigi's Mansion 3. So I had a speculation that there was going to be some other type of big Metroid thing going on. But Metroid Prime 4, just about half a year later, was announced to be getting restarted, a delay. So whatever sort of cross-promotion they may have been planning between Smash Bros. And Metroid didn't really happen. But now, with Metroid Prime 4 coming out and Smash Bros. Likely being in development, and the focus of Sylix in Metroid Prime 4, which is now obviously confirmed with him in the trailer, I think that one very likely character for Smash Bros. Is Sylix. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see this as soon as the year after 2025, so 2026. I don't think Smash Bros. Is coming out in the first year, but the second year, I think it's pretty darn plausible. But that's all for now when it comes to this rabbit hole of Switch 2 game leaks and different things that may be going on. What do you make of it? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andre's Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.